Okay, I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is a public hearing of the Jackson County Board of Commissioners. And tonight's purpose is to hear input from our citizens here in Jackson County. We want to receive comment about the consideration of some amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance as it complies to the General Statute 160D and the associated amendments. And so at this time, before we do take public comment from the general public, I want to ask our planning director, Mr. Mike Poston, if he would, to come forward. I think he's going to offer, once again, for the board and for the public, a summary of some of the changes that are being presented and make some additional comments. And then we'll hear from the public and we'll go from there. So at this time, Mr. Poston, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioners, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening to talk with you about the amendments. What I'd like to do, I think we've got the PowerPoint. So what we have here is just the PowerPoint that I presented at the work session, and really just wanted to briefly re-summarize what exactly we are doing with these amendments and how we've progressed with those over time. So we did. I don't know if that's.
Just roll it.
Yeah. No.
You don't have to press it.
We'll work on that. No, it's going now. So, just a quick recap. I know we talked about this before, so I'll do it quickly. But prior to the UDO, we had about 22 land development regulation ordinances that we dealt with, and with 160D coming into view, we'd have to do a public hearing process for all of these. So it would have ended up, I think, before the UDO, we would have ended up with roughly 29 public hearings to achieve what we'll be able to do now with 5 public hearings. And just to put that in context, most jurisdictions look at about 2 and sometimes only 1 public hearing. So this has taken a little bit of cobbling together and some time to put together because these amendments are quite large in stature because the 160D amendments touch almost every part of our ordinance. And we also took the opportunity to look at cleaning up some of our ordinance structures. During the UDO process, it didn't translate quite as well as we'd like to, or there were some errors in version control. So we started out with all those amendments and backgrounds. It's a framework document, as we talked about, and we can skip past that. We've covered a little bit of that. So here's what we did. Part of it was, 160D put together the city and county enabling statutes. We needed to, into 160D. So we needed to update, among other things, all the statute references in the document now have to reflect 160D and not 153A, which was the county statute. We have to recommend, we also had to deal with some new laws regarding permit choice, looking at vested rights, looking at enforcement, looking at appeals to the Board of Adjustment decisions. We had to take all that into account. Performance guarantees for subdivisions. A lot of these things had changed with the passing of 160D, so we had to do that. And as I mentioned before, we also took a look and we had compiled a list of things that we needed to either clarify or correct from the UDO process when we brought all those documents together and merged them into one. So we updated terminology. We had conflict of interest statements that had to be put in for staff and appointed boards, and as well as the elected boards. We had to look at definitions like building, dwelling unit, bedroom, and sleeping unit all had to match the state's definition, or not, at least not be in conflict with the state's definitions. So we did that as well. We did the subdivision regulations. We talked about the vested rights and permit choice. Again, permit choice is not something that our local governing body ever had a thing to do with. It was something the state told us we had to comply with. The other thing that it also prohibited, the 160D statute prohibited, was in that new regulation was third-party downzoning. So I can't come ask the Board of Commissioners to downzone my neighbor's property from commercial to residential. That would not be allowed. Now, prior to that, somebody could make that request, but now, without the property owner's consent, you can no longer do that in the state of North Carolina. And of course, we looked at amendments to the enforcement. And that really specified how notice of violations would be issued and delivered, required a 30-day appeal time frame across the board, and we made those changes as well. So we did make several recommendations that would improve process, and we took a look at our graphics, and there were some errors in our graphics. We saw those, we identified those. The graphics that we had, we brought over from previous ordinances that were built in different software we don't necessarily have access to. They're really hard to manage and correct over time. And in fact, hadn't been corrected previously in the original ordinance when the ordinance changed because of the same issues that we had. We saw some of that in the cashier's jurisdiction. We saw a lot of that in the 441 jurisdiction as they changed ordinances, but their graphics, we just couldn't get them over time. They were not updated with the graphics and the language were not always updated simultaneously. Because of that, we've made the recommendation in most of our districts for those graphics that are specific to uses and standards, we would recommend removing those in favor of some tables and some other things that are more easily changed over time as our regulations change. We clarified definitions of major and minor subdivisions, how text amendments are initiated and by whom. It wasn't quite clear that the county didn't have to make an application for the county commissioners to request staff make a change. So, but that wasn't clear. That's not normally how it happens, but we wanted to make sure that was clarified. We wanted to clarify some road design criteria that was conflicting, but we did that. We want to clarify stream buffer requirements in the watershed, and basically that was where we had it located seemed to suggest the stream buffers only applied in the watershed to new subdivisions, and that's not correct. It applies everywhere. We wanted to make sure that was correct. That's how it's been applied and continues to be applied, but we want to make sure that was correct. We had some sidewalk standards and cashers and some setback regulations in POE and some density standards in US 441 that didn't merge. And some of that is during the UDO process, those standards changed and didn't get captured properly. Others were just historic that we went back and we're looking at it, just never got changed in previous iterations of the ordinance and did not get carried over into the UDO, but still need to be added because those are the rules that have been applied over time. But one of the few requests that we do that is a little bit new, which would be the exception to what we've mostly talked about, is the 441 Planning Council. During this process, as we started to go through the adoption process and go to all the boards and commissions, they did request that in their rural living district that duplexes be an allowable use. So instead of having another public hearing while we're having all these public hearings, we got them to agree to actually put this within the 160D changes. So we're bringing that as a kind of a very new item to this board, but we thought to bring it as a separate issue would be just an exercise that we could avoid by putting it into this document as well. We've gone to all 3 planning councils and to the planning board. You have received consistency statements from all 4 boards and committees. I will note that that the Cully Planning Council and the 441 Planning Council recommended the changes as presented by staff. I'll also note that the Cashers Planning Council did not recommend the same and like. There was concern when that public hearing was held, brought up by the community and those that spoke, that the graphic change and even some of the language that we have in the ordinance that talks about in the beginning, that talks about graphics only being for illustrative purposes. That was also something we put in for illustrative purposes, so they're just there for illustrations, but not for regulating anything. Just hope to clarify the written language with the picture. I think there's some concern because there's development concerns in cashers right now as larger developments are looking at potentially coming into the regulated district. And the community has concerns about how that operates. The main graphic that comes in concern is whether or not we have a maximum building size in cashers. Which historically we have not had a maximum building size in cashers, but the graphic, because of a version control issue in the UDO process, showed that we had a 5,000 square foot. Well, it just says 5,000 maximum, doesn't delineate a unit of measurement. But that conflicts with what the actual text says, which basically says during the whole time, there's never been a maximum building size, but there's always been a trigger for what triggers a special use permit. And in that special use permit process, the planning council, any planning council, because most of the standards are the same across the 3 planning councils when we go through special use permit processes. One of the standards is that the bulk size of the development or building is in conformity or conforms to the community that it's in. So there's always been an opportunity in that process for that to be addressed. But heretofore, there's never been a project quite like what we had seen be proposed either. And we're currently working with the Cashers Community Planning Council to address some of those concerns, and which I think we'll have some recommendations coming to this body, sometime at the beginning of the year that can help clarify better the expectation of development as we move through ULI and maybe some additional processes in the future as we talk about how we better manage growth in the Cashers district. The planning board also recommended the changes as shown on their consistency statement that the council has, or the Board of Commissioners have as well. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my brief remarks. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions from the board members?
When the Cashers Council voted not to support this at the time,
Yeah, so they actually just voted to recommend the amending of the 160D, the required 160D amendments, and not any additional language that would not specifically be related to the statutory changes.
and was that a unanimous vote with the members present?
That was not. I think that was a 4-1 vote. We had 5 members present at that meeting.
Any other questions from the board members? Okay, thank you, Mr. Poston.
Thanks, sir.
This time we'll move into the public comment section and allow members of the public to provide us some feedback concerning these proposed changes. I'll start with those on the list here, and the first name is Robin Walker. So Robin, if you'd like to come forward.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight. It's my first time at one of your meetings, so thank you very much. I'm going to start out and tell you, first of all, what it is that I'm asking of you, and then give you a little background about how we got to this point. What I'm asking, and I'm a full-time resident of Cashers. I'm involved with the Develop Cashers Responsibly group, as is my colleague Susan here. And we're just a volunteer citizens grassroots group that is concerned about development in the area. What we're asking for you to do is to respect the wishes of the Cashers Area Planning Council when they voted to just approve the 160D changes that are required by law, but not to adopt Section 1.5D or to make any changes to the graphics in 9.3 that pertain to Cashers. That's 9.1 and 9.2 figures. Going back in history a little bit, in November of 2020, you all recall there was a large development proposed at the Cashers Crossroads, and citizens who were adjacent to that development were extremely concerned. They hired their own attorney, and when the attorney came back in January to present his arguments against it, he brought up the issue of the 5,000 in the graphic, and it was actually one of the contested legal issues that was part of his motion. Now, that developer's application was later withdrawn in February, and at the March hearing, the members of the public expressed to the Cashers Planning Council that they would very much like to see maximum building size standards in Cashers so that there could be a check on these very large developments. And there was a presentation made with some suggested standards. So since that time, Cashers has been working on a maximum building size, but when these amendments came to public hearing in June, many members of the public came out and said, please do not get rid of these graphics at this stage of the game. Do not adopt Section 1.5 where it says they're just for illustrative purposes, because that is the only check that we have right now on maximum building size. And so what we're asking of you is to please do not adopt the changes to those figures in 9.3. And also, if you could indicate that if you do adopt Section 1.5D about graphics or for illustrative purposes only, please specify that it doesn't apply to Cashers, because right now we're in the process of working through developing new standards, and this would basically be make that impossible for us to have a check at this time. The other thing is that it's just really critical with the issue of permit choice. If you get rid of these standards tonight, then there's basically nothing holding back a developer from coming in, putting an application in now, and being able to use the ordinance as it currently stands before those new maximum building size standards are adopted. So it's like a window of time that they can come in and utilize this time when nothing is holding it back, even if those standards are later adopted. So that's why it's so critical to us. Thank you for listening, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here in the audience that'd like to speak that did not get a chance to sign up? I want to give you an opportunity. Let me make sure that I'm accurate. I did not see anyone signed up online to speak either. So no one else has joined. Okay. All right. Well, if there are no other public comments, then do I hear a motion that we adjourn the public hearing portion?
I move we do so.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right. We're going to take just a couple of minute recess before we start the regular meeting. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order for Jackson County Board of Commissioners this evening, November the 2nd. It's hard to realize that November is already upon us, but we do look out the window. We've had a beautiful view this evening here from the boardroom of the fall colors as the setting sun has highlighted the beautiful colors here in our mountains. So appreciate those that have joined us this evening. And first item of business is the approval of the agenda. Do we have any additions tonight? Any changes? Hearing none, then, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Okay, have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any question or discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye,
Aye.
and all opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Next is the approval of the minutes. You should have received a copy of the work session minutes from October the 12th, as well as a copy of the regular meeting minutes from October the 19th, as distributed by the clerk in advance. After having a chance to read those prior to tonight, are there any suggested changes? And if not, is there a motion in order to approve both of them?
I say we make a motion to approve.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, any question or discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Next, our administrative reports. As a chairman's report, I will report that I, as along with the county manager, attended the VIA County Commissioner Advisory Board meeting. That is an ongoing process. I think I highlighted at our last meeting
Yes.
where we are working to absorb and pull into VIA those that were in the LME called Cardinal, that were mostly down in the Piedmont area. And so this was an opportunity to have our first meeting with those counties that were the former Cardinal counties, and to go over some of the framework and continue the dialogue and discussion about how the regional boards and the new VIA board will be structured. And so we'll be looking to put that on the agenda here in the coming future in November to talk a little bit about what's being asked of us on these appointments, and to review. At that time, we'll try to have some more documents to let you have a look at, and some PowerPoint charts and so forth, just sort of help describe this process and how it's going to work, and have some presentations. But there will be more to come, but we did have that follow-up meeting last week with those other counties. I also just wanted to take this opportunity to highlight a couple of things that are happening in our local school system. I always take this honor and privilege to recognize some of our young people and the achievements that they have made. And there's been quite a few here lately. I know I saw where our men's soccer team had made it to the playoffs, but unfortunately, they did not able to proceed any further, and they came to a sudden end with a 5-1 loss to East Lincoln in the first round of the 3A state playoffs. But we do want to congratulate them on that achievement, and they've had a great season this year. Also, our Smoky Mountain High School band, I know they have won several awards. This has been sort of a rebuilding year for them, and they have placed very well in several regional competitions. And so I wanted to congratulate them and that announcement that has come out. Also, I saw this past week where the cross-country men and women's teams have qualified for state. So there again, another great achievement from our local high school. And finally, our Smoky Mountain High School football team will be hosting a playoff game this Friday night. I think that one's against Hickory. Is that correct, Coach?
It's Hickory.
It's Hickory.
It's at home. I believe it's the first home playoff game we've had since the Vikings.
Since the Vikings. Well, that's a long time ago.
Long time, really.
No, but a lot of great achievements, and I hope I've not left anybody out. And if I have, I didn't do it on purpose. I know there's so many, so I didn't want to leave anybody out. But please, somebody else fill in if I did. We'll mention them next time. But with that being said, I'll pass the baton off to our commissioner down on here on the end, Commissioner Striblin.
I mainly have had a lot of people complain about their cellular service, and I simply just tell them I'm not really a whole bunch we can do about that. You need to contact your provider. I
By
think
phone.
it's due to a lot of the reason that when they tore down the Scott building, and that's what I tell them, that knocked a lot of people out. Another complaint I've got from one gentleman was, what can we do about the traffic going into Bojangles at Silva Walmart? Because that's backed up all the time. And when you go in to go right, like to go to Kobe or something over there, you can't, because the cars are backed up literally to when you turn into Walmart. So you've got to take the left lane, go out and go all the way around. And he was just asking, is there anything that we can come up with that, and I said, unfortunately, there's really not, because that's right there on the corner that way. And unless if we can spin the building around or something like that, then that's about the way it's going to have to be.
Well, and that's located in the town of Silva, and that'd be the Silva Police Department and North Carolina DOT and a whole bunch of other folks that he might probably want to contact and
Okay.
share some concerns with.
Okay. But that's all I have,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Jones?
No report tonight, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Commissioner Woody?
Yes, and, I'm sorry. Thank you for that help. I sent, our clerk of the board a couple pictures today, and I'd like those posted. This is our greenway, and my friend Alice Marie Pendergast and I were walking today, and it was so beautiful. And I know that we have walking areas now in Cashers. They have the Ramble up there. So many people are taking advantage of these different areas. We have one in Savannah. Of course, I guess I'm partial to this one by the Tuckasegee River, just because the river's so beautiful as well. But I serve as an ex officio member on the Greenway Committee, and we are working very hard to expand our Greenway. The committee's got some great ideas on getting out some maps that will be very helpful in people locating a walking trail near where they live. And some of those are even in the town of Silva or in Dillsboro, but this map will give people ideas of where they can walk. And I just want to encourage all of our citizens to get out, enjoy the beauty that we're so blessed to live in, this beautiful area of God's creation. And our county is working real hard to give access to as many citizens as possible.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Deeds?
I'm trying to figure this darn phone out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I had the opportunity to sit down at length and speak to our superintendent of schools this week. Maybe it's something that I should mention or talk to it about in a work session later, and it's something I hope we can. But she is almost at the end of anything to do about custodians, lunch workers, bus drivers. And I know over at the Board of Education, they've put a list out, and each person that works in the office over there is cleaning that building. They got their day at that. They're responsible for keeping the building clean because they can't get a person in there to work. And they got bus routes. It's sometimes one person's having to drive 3 routes. And so the kids is getting on really late because he's already run one route, then another route, and this is the 3rd route. And we have given a lot of money to the schools and done a lot of things. And I don't really, this is a problem we have, and I don't have the solution. But I think it would be good for us as commissioners to get together with the school board or the superintendent or our county manager with the superintendent, Sifford, just see if we can figure out some way we may could help them in some way with this problem that they have. I know we have a huge problem across the whole country with labor shortage and this and that. But these are our kids at school, and it comes down to safety with this too, about bus drivers and kids getting to school and their lunches and how clean the school is and so forth. And with COVID and all the things that we have, I don't know if anything's much more important right now, keeping our schools as clean and sanitary as we can. So I hope that's something that we can look at, not down the road, but I mean, the very near future. It's a problem come tomorrow morning at the schools. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Adams.
I don't have a formal report today, but I do believe we have somebody signed up to speak, give public comment.
Okay. Okay, at this time, we will receive informal comments from the public. And the first person on the list this evening is Edward Thurston. Mr. Thurston?
Chairman, thanks for having me. I wanted to address the building plans for the walls that we're going to be put around the schools. And so, but first, a little background of mine is I went to Scotts Creek. I graduated from Smoky in 2002. Afterwards, I bounced around for a little bit, and then eventually joined the Army, the infantry, for 9.5 years until I was medically retired. During that time, countless hours of security training, including being certified in Level 2 anti-terrorism training, which is a 40-hour course certification, then being the company NCO for anti-terrorism in the facility. And I also help plan, implement, and supervise security measures in a multi-million-dollar compound overseas. I'm not going to claim that I'm some super expert on the subject, but I'm also no slouch on it as well. So I'm aware a few years back, the student body got together and asked for a meeting, I believe with y'all on the school board, with 3 requests. One was for a counselor to help with mental health issues at the school. 2 was more student resource officers on campus, or at least 1, I believe. And then the second was the single entry point schools. So I just wanted to express my concern with walling in students inside a school and kind of the risk reward as to the amount of money that's being spent on it, the $7.5 million roughly. So counselor and RSO are by far the most recommended assets to have on campus to prevent school shootings. That, coupled with clear protocols that are known and rehearsed by the staff and students, are core things that can be done to prevent an incident and reduce the chance of mass casualties. I base this off the statement off of hours of reading and research that I'll be providing you guys an email. Sorry I didn't get to it. I've been about the whole week I've been researching this and getting my head wrapped around it, including a 450-page report from the Parkland shooting from the school, I believe it was down there, their report from that. With that said, with my limited knowledge of the building plan due to its secrecy, which is kind of another issue I have, I take issue with the walling in of campuses and believe that it will not increase the safety of the children within them, but may actually lessen their safety. Even if walling in the campus were to make students safer, and it's from a school shooting, the cost-benefit ratio doesn't make sense to me. That money could be allocated to other issues in the community and schools and get greater safety returns for the cost. Based off my research, since 2006 to present, there might be some newer ones that I missed, but there's been 3 shooting deaths that can be attributed to school shootings in the entire state of North Carolina. But in 2019 alone, motor vehicle accidents and suicides accounted for 108 deaths and 54 deaths, respectively. So that's 1 year with 160 plus deaths compared to 3 in the entire 15-year period since 2006. So compared to the cost to gains issue, I don't think it's really a great way to spend money. And I don't want to say that in any way it's kind of belittle the safety of the students, because there is many things that can be done in lieu of building a wall around the schools, right? And so one of the things I see personally wrong with it is that if you go back and you look at every school shooting within North Carolina, Basically, it started out as a fight between two kids. One of them pulled out a gun and shot the other one. And then if you also look at the Parkland, Santa Fe, and Sandy Hook shootings, in all those cases, the gun was already inside the school. And so a wall around the school, some of which had those single entry point schools, some of them had security measures in place, the gun still made it anyways. And so if you have a single point entry school, much like this building here, right? You have downstairs, you have metal detectors, and you have extra machine to scan bags and wallets and keys and whatnot. So unless you're planning on implementing something like that, in addition to walling in the schools, you're really kind of putting the horse before the cart, or the cart before the horse, excuse me. And after talking to Mr. Buchanan, I guess he's the assistant superintendent of schools, he told me that the sheriff didn't recommend metal detectors at this time. And personally, I don't particularly want my kid going to school with metal detectors in the school anyways. My son goes to Scotts Creek, so it's a bit before he goes to Smoky Mountain. But that seems like a bit of an extreme measure, considering the state, the number of shootings within the state. I understand that even in the countrywide, you have those are the three biggest shootings in high schools and younger. But even then, if you take a realistic approach and visual of it, it's really not something it's scary, it's concerning, but it's not something I lose sleep over at night. If I made a list of 100 things that kept me up at night, school shootings and bomb threats wouldn't even make it onto the list in terms of my concerns about my son going to school. So without metal detectors and things like that, again, there's nothing to stop a student or an individual from coming in through into the building, even with that single entry point with a firearm, right? Handguns are this big. Magazines are this big. So it's just a big waste of money when something could be put towards maybe some sort of comprehensive driving program. Sorry if I'm running out of time.
Your time is up.
As well as other just safety things around the town. Even getting more employees to the school with maybe raising pays to get more people in there. So but yeah, if there's any questions or whatever, I can address those anytime, and I'll get those emails to you as well.
Okay, thank you so much for your comments.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
I don't think there was anyone else signed up online either, was there? Correct, okay. All right, let's move on then to our legislation portion tonight. First item on the agenda is the Unified Development Ordinance Amendments, and Mr. Poston, once again.
Should just move it around where you can see the pointer.
I think we're okay. Mr. Chairman, at this point in time, now that this is the fifth and final public hearing that our ordinance and the state statutes require us to have as part of our consideration process, this does come back to the commissioners to either adopt the amendments as proposed or to make modifications. Staff position still is we recommend the amendments as we've presented them to all the boards. In reference to the cashier's amendments, we still recommend making those changes, even though we are working with that community on updating those regulations. The reason is because my determination will still be the same with, tomorrow if the regulations stay the same as they were a year ago this time when we started talking about these issues, or 9 months ago at this time, that there's an error in the graphic. My determination when this came through and what we reported out to the Cashier's Planning Council when this came before them was our staff determination was there is no maximum, but there's a threshold which requires a special use permit to be required. And that special use permit has standards that staff does not approve. We give technical, much like your wireless telecommunication ordinances. If you sat through those public hearings, it's very similar. We have a staff review on technical issues, and then the board or the council has a set of standards that they have to go through line by line and produce findings of fact that those standards have been met based on the evidence that's been presented. As I mentioned before, one of those standards does deal with the size, the bulk, and the conformity of that of a building or development within the cashier's area, within that community that it sits. And so there is a consideration of size and bulk. Again, and to be fair, we've not had a lot of large-scale developments come through, so I couldn't give you a recollection of how all those, or I can't tell you how all those conversations have ever played out, but it's still a consideration. But I think that, and there are some issues with my determination, but also, and maybe Heather can speak to this from a legal perspective, but there are some legal issues with that being in there, as my determination still hasn't changed, so it does produce some points of conflict. But to be clear from where staff sits, we've never recognized a maximum building size in Cashers, not prior to the UDO and not after the UDO. And just to give you an illustration, the previous graphic that we changed, where some of this confusion came in, is that the threshold in one of the districts, the general commercial district, to apply for a special use permit was 5,000 square feet. So you can see where that may have come over. That changed in 2013 or 14 to 1,500 square feet. But that graphic never changed, even in the old ordinance. Staff still applied the 1,500 square foot threshold, not the 5,000 square foot threshold, because the text of the document told us that 1,500 square feet was the threshold. So historically, over time, we've made the same determinations. But there are some concerns that staff has that we will report out, that we have to report out, that I have to report out to this body about how we make those determinations and what that means over time and why we include it. The amendments that we are working on with the Cashers Planning Council does talk about, to some extent, some not necessarily. Well, let me back up. If you'll permit me, I'll let you know what the Planning Council has asked staff to present at the November meeting, which may give some clarity to where this conversation is going in Cashers. At least right now, it can continue to evolve. But what they've asked us to do, we brought to them a set of near-term type of standards that we could put in, as we know that ULI is coming in. We know that we'd like to bring back a request to this body about updating the entirety of the ordinance, because Cashers of 2003 does not exist today, and we need the ordinances to reflect that, but that's holistically, not just piece by piece. But we do believe there are some things that we can do to strengthen some of those requirements, not necessarily requirements, but information that we're getting to evaluate some of these projects. So some of that is standardizing the information that we receive from applicants when they come before us with a special use permit. If you have any transportation impact analysis, we'd like to see that completed by DOT and established at the time. We'd like to know more about your utility plans, your stormwater plans as they relate. So, I mean, there are things like that we'd like to see codified even prior to any other movement that comes into the community. The members of the Planning Council had asked, and the Planning Council as a whole asked us to work on this at the last work session in October, was to look at two pieces. One was raising the threshold for a special use permit from 1,500 to 8,500 square feet, and also look at adopting what we call a floor area ratio that would govern how much gross square footage of building you could have in relationship to the lot it sits on. So for easy math example, you have a 10,000 square foot lot, and what's been proposed and what to be looked at is a floor area ratio of what we call 1.5, which is 1.5 times the lot size. So 15,000 square feet of building of gross square footage could be put on a 10,000 square foot lot. Now but there's other considerations just beyond that math calculation, which is we also require parking, and we also require some stormwater standards. We also require some buffering in certain cases. So your ability to achieve that threshold is dependent on your ability to also, provide all the standards that we additionally require. So those are some concepts that are being discussed. We're going to bring back what we call some strike-through language, like you've seen a lot done, for more consideration and community discussion. I don't know where that leads. My hope is that leads us to some more recommendations, like I said at the beginning of the year, but neither can I guarantee that timeline, because there's still a lot to be discussed, even within those standards that they've asked us to come back with. We've also been asked to take a look at some prohibited uses, some other things that we'll kind of put into a Casher-specific type of package. The other thing that's worth mentioning in that is that we'd also look at requiring a community meeting prior to an application being submitted, that would allow for more input from the public before the application gets submitted, which a lot of times doesn't happen until afterwards. So those are the concepts that we're working through. So that is part of what staff has been requested by the Planning Council to work on for further discussion. So I just put that out there just to give you some context to where those conversations are and how they may evolve and before they get to your table again, potentially here in the near future. I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Mr. Jones, did you have a
I
comment?
think you've answered this once, but the planning board's vote was unanimous.
It was. Again, it's a bit odd because we had four recommendations in front of you, and the planning councils had divergent recommendations as well. So you have all four of the consistency statements and recommendations before you, but the planning board recommendation was unanimous.
Thank you.
So let me clarify the process too for this. If the board were to choose to take action this evening on the amendments, we would approve the amendments plus the consistency statement.
Yes, sir.
Other comments or questions by board members?
I don't know enough about to ask questions. We had a young lady to come and speak to us tonight, guys. From your understanding, what is it she wants?
Well, and we've had an opportunity to speak at length at the different meetings. I think that they are concerned about large-scale development being allowed to proceed with an application, and keeping that what I think folks believe is a building size maximum. Again, not what staff believes exists, but by keeping that would prevent larger scale developments from happening until maybe the council has had an opportunity to discuss what changes may occur in the near term as we wait for potential longer term solutions to be put into place. Yes, sir.
Can I jump in? Boys, basically in the ordinance up there, there's a picture, an illustration in part of that ordinance that it basically states that there's potentially a maximum of 5,000 square feet that's allowable to be built. What's being asked, what's being recommended by staff and by legal counsel, it's been not approved by the planning council and Cashers, but approved by the planning board, is for that illustration to remain in the document. The problem is that staff and legal says that, first of all, that was an error. The people we paid to write this UDO has written a letter saying it was an error.
What was an error?
The
Picture?
The graphic.
The picture should not
that
be there.
says that there's a 5,000 square foot maximum allowable building footprint. Has there been a project approved above 5,000 square feet?
Yeah, we've approved the Boys and Girls Club. The Brookings building up there is over that. The Village Green building would have been over that.
Point being is there's never been a 5,000 square foot maximum, like where you just can't build above 5,000 square feet. It's never been applied. So right now, the concern is, and I don't want to discount the concern of the community in Cashers, is there was a large development, or some people in Cashers, there's a large development, and they're afraid that if this gets removed, then that developer may come back and put in an application and be approved, was it vested or grandfathered, basically be able to come in and put an application before these new regulations are put in that Mike was explaining. So the dilemma we run into is right now, staff and legal counsel is saying that it's never existed. And what it's causing is, and I don't want to speak for you, Heather, the way it's been explained to me is it's causing a legal dilemma. It's causing potential liability for the county because there is a graphic in there that has an error on it that has never been intended to be there and never been enforced as they believe it should be enforced. And so really that's out of everything that we're talking about, there's one page that has one little sentence on it that basically says maximum, what is it? I'm not sure where
It just says maximum building size 5,000.
5,000 square feet.
No, it says 5,000. That adds to the confusion. We're not sure that there's not really a unit of measurement there, which still can be can be debated as to what it could be.
So
It
what's been
mean-
advised by legal counsel, what's been advised is that that needs to be cleaned up because it's never been there. It's never been enforced. It's never intended to be there. Now, what Mike is saying is what used to be in there when we talk about this 1,500 square feet versus the 5,000 is what triggers the conditional use process. You've been through this with the cell tower, you know, that whole quasi judicial system is that ultimately there has been square footage alluded to that triggers that process, but never square footage that just says this is the maximum building size. So the dilemma is there is a group of citizens and cashers who believes that era provides some level of protection, okay, from this developer or a developer coming in the next few months and applying for a permit for something more than 5,000 square feet versus you have staff and legal basically saying that it never existed in the first place. It's really important what Mr. Poston is saying about the planning department has made a determination that it doesn't exist. That means if somebody comes in today, let's just say that none of this we didn't have any of this conversation. If somebody walked in today and put in an application that's above 5,000 square feet, would you take it through? I mean, obviously.
We would make the same determination today as we did.
You would allow the application to go through, you would
Correct.
allow it to go through. So the point being is if somebody walked in tomorrow, let's say this board didn't take any action, it would go through the process and eventually end up at a quasi judicial hearing. And so the dilemma that we run into is as you know, that quasi judicial hearing it's all about process and protecting everybody's procedural rights. And again, what we've been advised by legal is this causes potential legal confusion and liability to Jackson County. Now, I don't want to jump in. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Leaving this error in is a liability. It means that when a quasi-judicial hearing happens, that either if it was denied based on this, the developer has action against us. If it was not denied and it was approved, a party withstanding could have potential action against us. When it was described by Ms. Walker as a check, that check means lawsuit is what that means. It is a check because it will delay the process because we will probably be in court arguing over that. Unfortunately, right now, the way the quasi-judicial statutes are written, it also comes with attorney fees as a liability for the county. So there's a very good chance we'd be responsible for all of the attorney fees involved as well. So just from the liability standpoint, this is clearly an error. The consultant that drafted the ordinance said it was an error. They tried to fix the graphic. It wasn't successful, and it just needs to come out so we can move on and the planning staff can apply the ordinance correctly.
Mr. Woody, did you have a comment?
I do have one question. What did you say the square footage of the new Boys and Girls Club would be? Has it already been approved?
It has. It's a little over 7,000 square feet. It may be 7,100 or 7,200 square feet. I'd have to look at the building plans, but it's over 7,000.
And I believe Ms. Walker works with the Boys and Girls Clubs.
That I don't know. Sorry.
Yes, that's correct. I'm the
Yeah.
president of the board.
Yeah. So you're in favor of that size of that building?
May I address the commission?
Let's not get off on
I'm
that. That's a
sorry.
totally
Okay.
separate topic.
All right, sorry. Never mind.
Any other comments or questions about the amendments to this ordinance?
The only thing I will point out, just for the record, is that staff does believe that the ordinance as presented are consistent with the adopted plans that we have at the county level.
Is there a motion concerning this ordinance, or this request for the amendments? Well, I'll make a motion that we approve the amendments in the consistency statement as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Any question or discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'd call the roll, please.
Commissioner Deeds?
Yes.
Commissioner Woody?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Stribling?
Yes.
Chairman McNamee?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Next item is Resolution R21-33. This is concerning the sheriff and registered deed salaries. Mr. Adams,
Yes, sir. This is an item that was brought up before the board. Let me see if I can't. Because we're gonna have to get a piece of paper or something up here, because I can't get this thing to, there it goes. Okay. As previously discussed with the board, this is a resolution being brought before the board in regards to the salaries for both the sheriff and the register of deeds. In accordance with previous processes and procedures, the board needs to move forward with the resolution setting the salaries for both of these positions. A minimum, I believe, is 14 prior to the last day of filing. So that really means that this board needs to take this action up in November. This was something I meant to put on last work session, and I did not. I just forgot to put it on the work session. We do, if the board's in a position to move forward, I believe at our last conversation, a lot of the board members were somewhat in favor of moving forward with this particular resolution. This is the same resolution that's been done for the past several elections. What it's basically doing is setting these two salaries at the minimum salaries for both of the grade for the sheriff and the grade for the register of deeds. And as previously discussed, depending upon who gets elected, the current pay policy would be applied to that person, as previously discussed. So if they have experience and things of that nature, then me as a manager would be able to apply our current pay policy up to step 12. Anything above that would have to come back before this board. So I leave it to the board's pleasure if they're willing to move forward with this tonight, or our deadline really is, if not tonight, mid-month meeting.
is there interest by the board to take action tonight? If so, someone will make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Any question or discussion about Resolution R21-33? Okay, hearing none then, Madam Clerk, if you'd call the roll, please.
Commissioner Stribling,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Woody,
Yes.
Commissioner Dees, Chairman McNamara.
Thank you.
We do have need for closed session, but before we do, is any members of the press corps still on the, I think they all dropped off, okay. We do have need for closed session. I know real property, what was the other one?
It's going to be legal, real property, personnel, and criminal investigation.
Well, we've got 4 of them this evening, so would I have a motion to go into closed session concerning those 4 items?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We'll take it. Okay, I'll report that the board took no action in closed session with the exception of approving the minutes. And with that being said, we have no other business this evening before the board. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn this meeting.
Okay, is there a second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, good night.